This is Kathy from Gadget Stop 321, and today I'm going to be taking a look at Sailor Manyo Yomogi. I'm going to be testing it in a variety of pins and nib sizes ranging from a Pilot 78G with an extra fine nib up to a 1.5 stub nib. Alright, and I'm going to start with the Pilot Extra Fine. I pretty much just use this extra fine for testing inks at this point. It is such a fine nib that I find there aren't many ink and paper combinations that it really feels good to write with it. I'm sure there's a practical purpose for this, for a nib this fine, but I find that this is a good way to test how an ink will perform with nibs that aren't super smooth. Alright, so it's not bad. Now, when we take a look at some of the other papers, I did experience some scratchiness with those other papers, but I didn't on this. This is Tomoe River paper in an old Hobonichi planner, and that wasn't bad. It wasn't a pleasure to use, but you know, it didn't jump out as being unpleasant. So now there is a big jump in performance when you go from the extra fine to the fine. This is a Pilot 78G with a fine nib. This is very smooth. Alright, now as I'm writing with this, I'm thinking, oh, this kind of reminds me maybe a little bit of Konpeki, but I had an ink earlier, the Manyo Sumir, that was a bright blue that I said, hey, that really reminds me of Konpeki. And I hope you can see here, this Yomogi has a little bit of a green tint to it, where this does, it's a bright blue. The Sumir is a bright blue and does look like Iroshizuku Konpeki. But this has that same brightness of the Konpeki. It just has a little bit of green to it. Alright, now I've got a new pen in my lineup of pens that I'm using for testing inks. This is a Pilot 78G Plus Demonstrator. It's got a medium nib. Now I've also got a medium nib. I've been using my Jinhao medium nib in these ink tests. So I'm going to kind of see today which one I'm going to keep in the rotation for testing inks. And again, the jump from fine to medium, there's a big jump in, it feels like there's a big jump in wetness, and this is very smooth. Let me scoot my pins out of the way. Yeah, big jump in wetness there. So I'm curious to see how that looks when it dries. So this is more of a teal than a turquoise. So Sumir was more of a turquoise. This has a little green in it, so it's more of a teal. This is a Jinhao X750 with a medium nib. Alright, those two are very similar. One thing I noticed with this ink, as I did my other writing tests earlier, as I played with this, any imperfection in your nib, you kind of feel it. Now, some of the inks that we've used, this Jinhao medium felt just super smooth, but I can feel there's a little imperfection in this nib, and I can feel it with this ink. And the same thing, let's see, when we get to the other writing samples, there were like the extra fine, on some of the other papers, I could really feel a scratchiness with the extra fine. So far on this Tomoe River paper, it hasn't been, the Jinhao is the only one that I felt a little something in the nib. Let's see, this is a Nemesine with a Nemesine Singularity with a 0.6 stub. Now, up to this ink, this nib has just been super smooth with all the other inks. And this is another one. I can feel a little imperfection on this nib. It feels like there's a little burr on the inside of the nib slit, because I can feel it in one direction. It's just so minor that with other inks I'm not feeling it. Let's see. I need to switch out and test the two stubs now. I'm loving the look of this ink. When I zoom in and show you these little scribbles, it looks like I'm starting to see some sheen. All right. I'm going to switch out the nib on the Nemesine. And put in the 1.1 stub. Give it another quick dip. Make sure the nib is saturated with ink. I'm thinking that the writing samples with these stub nibs on this white paper, okay, yeah, that's the 1.1. All right. Let's scoop this up a little bit. This pen and nib combination is laying down quite a bit of ink, and I love the way it looks. Yeah, look how wet that was. All right, I'm going to switch out one more nib, the 1.5. And then we'll look at some other papers. Yeah, this, when in the nibs that really lay down a lot of ink, I really like how rich this ink looks. All right. All right, let's take a look. While that's drying, we'll take a look at some of the other ink samples. This is in my little ARC ink journal that I keep. Now, on the 1.1, it looks a little brighter. I can't remember. I think I wrote on another paper first, and then without dipping wrote on this one. You see it's a little brighter. The 1.5 is a darker blue. I think I dipped my pen right before I wrote this one. You can see it spreads a little bit, but in just the normal everyday writing nibs, I'm not seeing much feathering. Let's see. You can see this is one that wants to come through the paper a little bit, so keep that in mind. Some of these are a little more prone to bleeding through paper. On Rhodia, I really liked the look of this one. In the finer nibs, it was a little brighter, but as you got into the wider nibs that were laying down more ink, it's just a nice teal that leans a little more blue. It's got a little green to it. Looks nice in that Nemesign stub. On my copy paper, and I've mentioned my copy paper is a better quality copy paper than I normally get. It didn't want to feather too bad. It was pleasant to write on. And this is 24-pound copy paper, so it's pretty thick. You can see some spots where it's just wanting to come through. So, let's see. In my Weeks that has cream colored Tomoe River paper, let's see. On the 1.1 that really, I had a lot of ink on it. Like I mentioned on the other one, I probably wrote this sample first and then wrote on I think it was the Rhodia or the ARC notebook. But on this one where I really laid down a lot of ink, you can start to see some red sheen, just a little bit. And so you've got that greenish blue with a hint of red sheen and a little bit of shading. This is a pretty ink. I'm going to compare it. Let me see let me show you what it looks like next to Sumir. Well, it's kind of, they're both looking really blue, but I can see this is a little more teal. Now I know what Chris Signs is talking about when she talks about how difficult it is to show some colors, show their true colors. And in my Leuchtturm, this is how it compares to the others. So you can see maybe you can see a little bit of the greenness here. All right, and last of all, the white Tomoe River paper. And yeah, there's a lot of sheen visible here. And even in, let's see, on the Pilot Medium, I'm starting to see the sheen is starting to be visible from the Pilot Medium down. So that's a pretty ink. All right, if you found this video helpful, please give me a thumbs up, and if you'd like to see more videos like this, please subscribe to my channel.